Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership and Culture First podcast, where we discuss the complexities of leadership and culture, but also offer solutions to aspiring new and experienced leaders. We invite guests to share their knowledge and experience and ask those challenging questions. As coaches, we aim to provide real insights, enable reflection, and challenge thinking. Join us on our mission to unleash your leadership potential. Welcome back, everyone. And thanks for joining us for this episode. Today, we've got the pleasure of welcoming Janet Shreeve to have a chat with us. She's from Care Assist and Shreeve Care Services as a founder of that company, working to provide solutions for the care sector to ensure efficiency, profitability, and cost effectiveness wherever possible. Shreeve Care Services provide bespoke business development consultancy and advice services, both to new care businesses or established businesses looking to grow, expand and develop, and to individuals looking to understand and find care services for a relative or friend. Founded with a passion for enhancing the lives of individuals with care and support needs, the team led by Janet as director is committed to delivering personalised solutions for both care businesses and individuals seeking quality care services. So we're absolutely delighted to hear about your business, where you are in your life, how this came about. Really looking forward to hearing all about it, Janet.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you very much, Sharon and Nikki, for having me on here. It's a pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. But yeah, it's sort of quite interesting when I hear what you're just saying, because if you'd said to me probably 4 years ago, I would be sitting here talking about doing this as my own business, I would have said, don't be ridiculous, because I had not planned on setting this business up at age 65, which is what
It's amazing.
We always assume that we're going to set up a business much younger in life, or, I thought, oh God, I wish I'd done this like 15, 20 years ago. It would have been, I might have had a greater degree of energy. But having said that, I also realized that when you do set something up later in life, you've got the experience and probably knowledge, and without a shadow of a doubt, a little bit more patience than you have when you're younger to get things going, because it is hard. It is hard. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I've absolutely loved what I've done, and I've learned so much, which just goes to show you never stop learning, however old you are.
That comes back to my saying every day's a school day. Doesn't have an age limit on it.
Exactly.
Well, Janet, I'm really
keen. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm really keen to understand, because clearly the business that you've got, what was it about your values that drove you to set this business up? Was it your values that are really important to you in your business?
It is. It was and is. And I think it was also, I think really what was the catalyst was having gone through, particularly from the advisory side, having realised the issues that I'd gone through when I was looking for care and sorting out scenarios with my own mother. But I think above all, having worked in the care sector for nearly 20 years, because unlike both of you, my background isn't care. I started in care probably coming up to 20 years ago. Prior to that, I was a teacher. My degree's in Italian. So I used to teach Italian in Kent. So I come from, if somebody had said to me, you're going to work in care, I would have said, don't be ridiculous. I won't cope with this. I know nothing about care. And I have learned so much. And I've also been incredibly grateful to people who have been supportive of me, actually, considering I hadn't worked in care all of that time. But when I started the business and when I started thinking about it, by the time I had come to that point, I'd identified a lot of issues that people were struggling with, particularly around the advisory service. And also from a business side, so many providers don't have time to do their own business development. They don't think about it.
Mm.
And the way that care is moving, we have got to look at it, I think, in a different way. We've got to approach the whole sector we need to be a bit more forward thinking. And whilst I understand that nothing can happen overnight, there are certain things that we can make a difference with quite quickly, above all being more efficient. And I think what people don't realise, until you need care, you have no idea where to go, what your choices are, how it works, or anything else for that matter, because the advice out there is poor, really poor. And that's really, I think, what started my business.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, that the advice around care is really poor. And some of the conversations that I've certainly had with people who work across care is that discussion should maybe be put earlier into schools, where people start to plan where they're going to be in care and how to have those discussions, and knowledge. Because even families find it difficult to talk about care. It's a bit of a social taboo. And young people certainly don't think they're ever going to be my age. So they just think they're going to be young forever. So probably that might be a good thing. What do you think about that? Should we start those conversations earlier?
I completely agree. And in fact, I did a talk fairly recently about exactly that, about our unwillingness to talk about care. And, we certainly don't want to talk about death. Nobody wants to talk about dying. Nobody wants to talk about end of life. And nobody wants to even think about it, which is crazy, because at some point it's going to happen to all of us in some shape
Death and
or form.
taxes.
Exactly. And I don't know why it's such a taboo. And I think it's because it's fear. And you're absolutely right. It should start much earlier. And I think if I had known a lot of what I know now, probably 20 to 30 years ago, I think a lot of my own attitude would have been different, because I wasn't in the care sector. I didn't understand it. And I was absolutely terrified of it. But we don't put the emphasis on the importance of educating people from being quite young. I mean, I'm not saying you probably need to do it at 6, but by the time people are in secondary school, it should be, it's not mooted as a career really anymore, is it? We all want to be a manager. We all want to be an influencer. Well, why don't we influence people around the care sector? Let's do a bit of influencing there. That is what I'd love to see. So that's a thought.
That's an amazing statement.
Like that,
yeah.
No, I was just thinking how amazing that was.
We're like, yeah.
You think of an influencer being young and being these people that are coming forward in that way, and I'll hold my hands up and say I don't get it as a career choice, but I can see the impact of that. That's probably my age, I think, more than anything else. But I absolutely agree. Why are there very few influencers in care? There are nurse influencers, and there are people but they're not the big people that you see out there, and we need to see more of that, I think, and that brings young people's conversations in a different direction.
And it does. And I think it goes back to the leadership and the culture, exactly of what we're talking about on this podcast, is the leadership around care. We're always the Cinderella. We're always viewed as the Cinderella. I mean, this morning I've been listening to Wes Streeting actually talking, and he talks always about the NHS. Now, the NHS is really important. I'm not denying that for 1 second. But there's always part of me that screeches at the radio or TV. I thought it was the Department of Health and Social Care. And where's the social care bit? And until we lead the care sector in a more dynamic and a more positive way, I think we've got to be putting that first. And that's why I was so determined when I set this whole side of the business up, that we need to look at it from all different aspects. We need to give that, people shouldn't be frightened to ask, well, is this the right care I want for my loved one? It's not what I wanted. And certainly the clients I've dealt with, I mean, some of them have left me completely shocked with what's going on out there. And until we all stand up and speak out, what do we do? Where do we go?
Absolutely. Hannah, how do you think it's best for people to use their voice in that way?
Well, I think with what we're doing, actually, we are starting to speak out. I think there are more people that I know now who are willing to talk about it, who are willing to put their head above the parapet and say, this isn't right. And by the same token, making people aware, because I think the other issue around this is people assume that care is like the NHS, that they don't have to pay for it. The reality is they do in many cases, and it's not going to get any better. And we need to make people aware of what their choices are if they are having to pay for things. We're just not giving enough. We're not giving enough support out there.
So as you started this business up, and please tell us more around exactly what you're doing, do you feel that it was an advantage or a disadvantage as somebody coming through that wasn't in the club, somebody that hadn't come in care all their career?
Being quite honest, it was a disadvantage because, being honest about it, it was a disadvantage because it was almost, well, what do you know? Why are you talking to us? I mean, and I always say to people, look, I'm not I don't know your job. I'm not a doctor. I can't possibly, diagnose somebody. But just looking at things, I do have a degree of common sense. And sometimes the common sense gets forgotten and you might not have any brain that you can work that out. And however it is you want to look at it. And I think we're almost dumbed down, actually. So, yeah, I think it was a disadvantage. But equally, I've always been very determined. And I was absolutely and am absolutely determined to make as much of a difference as possible, be that by the advisory side, be that by helping care providers with some business development, look at where they can develop their business, look at options within their business. Have they thought of different things? Because again, that's something I work with providers on. I've done a lot of work around, it's probably my area that I've worked predominantly in, which is live-in care. I have actively promoted that as much as I possibly can because I think it's a really valued service that we don't promote enough. And then from the other side is looking at ways that businesses can be more efficient and can be quicker off the mark to take a business forward. Because, I mean, I was talking to somebody fairly recently, and in fact, she's been on a podcast that I do. And she was saying that in the care home, they had, I think at the time, they had about 10 free beds. And obviously that's income. And we've been looking at systems to make their business more efficient so that they can take people quickly, that they are out there. So it's looking at all of the whole process to try and make it a bit quicker and a bit more efficient. And that's really what I set the business up to do, whatever side it is, be it advisory or working with providers.
I think just because it's probably a really good point to ask the question, because I'm really keen to understand a bit more about you and how, how you have kind of your leadership and how you've kept fighting for it. And we were posed a question by our previous, one of our previous guests. For those of you who listen, you'll know that each of our guests poses a question for the next guest. So I think this is really, really poignant for you, actually. This is around resilience in terms of setting up your business. What are your blind spots in terms of your resilience and how do you keep a check on them? And I'm just thinking of that, particularly as you've been setting up this business, not being part of the club, not knowing the kind of health and care sector necessarily. So how have you retained that drive and that resilience to keep going?
Gosh, that's a tricky one. Gosh, that's putting me on the spot, isn't it?
First thing in the morning, get you thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fine. How have I kept the resilience? I think when I look back, it comes from my parents. I think they were pretty resilient. I mean, looking back, I mean, they were actually married for 13 years before I was born, which actually is probably just as well, because otherwise I'd be sitting here in my 80s now. So I'm probably quite glad in that respect that I haven't quite reached that age yet. But, obviously they went through the war and one thing and another, but they both worked extremely hard. And both of them, well, particularly my mother, and this is absolutely nothing to do with care whatsoever, but just to explain where it comes from. My mother was a very good pianist, and she used to play the piano at different schools in the days when one did singing and dancing, which of course they don't really do now in quite the same way. And of course, I think it was the late 70s, the schools decided that was no longer appropriate. But because she trained as a shorthand typist, as it was in those days, she then became a legal secretary, and she worked until she was 79. And they always said that actually she was the most efficient secretary that they ever had, because she wouldn't be out the door at 5 o'clock. She'd be sitting there finishing the letters off or whatever. So I think the resilience has come from seeing that with my own parents, and the determination has come from, I've always been very determined that life can be much better than you think it can be. And let's give it a jolly good go to see if we can make a difference. And I sort of fell into working in care because I divorced. I had to get a job. And I remember getting my first job within the care sector when I was in Kent. I was interviewed by somebody who took me on because I had a degree, spoke Italian, and quite liked opera, which I couldn't quite see the relevance to care at the time. And the rest is history. So I carried on working there. Now, if you'd said to me, that's why I said earlier, if you'd said to me 20 odd years ago, I'd be doing this, I would have said, don't be ridiculous. But I think care is a drug, and it gets into your system. And the more it gets into your system, the more you want to make a difference, because you see the good and you see the bad and the indifference, I suppose, as well. So I guess that's probably where it's come from. And I think I've always tried my utmost to do my best to make a difference. I have been really fortunate along the way because I've met people who have supported me along that track, and I've never been afraid of hard work. But I do think if you want to run your own business, do not think it's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, because I still get people saying to me, well, I don't know why you're working at the weekends. And I mean, a prime example was the weekend just gone, where a client rang me on the Saturday afternoon, said, I've got a disciplinary scenario going on. Do you mind coming and helping me? So, well, the weather was awful, so I didn't really mind getting in my car and driving and going and spending Sunday with her. She's lovely. I've known her for a while. And I think that's what you have got to be prepared to do. I mean, if I couldn't have done it, she would have been fine. But equally, you have got to be prepared to go the extra mile. And I think it's been that resilience because I've seen it. I've grown up with it. And I hope that my daughters see the same with me and have learned from that as much as possible, which I think they reasonably have. So fingers crossed.
Thank
if
you.
that answers that question.
Yeah, no,
hopefully.
absolutely. Lovely. Thank you.
But it is, I think whatever you do, or whatever I've tried to do, I have tried to do my best, and I don't always get it right. And definitely, sometimes one can go too far down a route and then realize you probably should have stopped about half a mile back along the road. And sometimes that can be the bit of the blind spot that I'm not great at always picking up. And when you're working on your own, that's even harder. You need somebody to say, oi, enough, that's not quite right. So it can be tricky.
That's a really
Thank
good
you.
point, actually, because I think as leaders, people are often reluctant to stop and to make that decision and say, oh, this isn't working. We need to pause it for a while or stop that for a while. So I think that's a really good piece of information for current leaders and for leaders coming forward about going too far down the route.
Yeah. And it's hard because I think that the thing that we all struggle with, not necessarily saying you're wrong, but you can, it is being able to admit you might have made a bit of an error, a mistake or whatever. We're not good at putting our hands up. And I think it's the accountability thing that we're never very good at doing, and we don't want to do sometimes. And I think that's always difficult, very difficult.
And tenacious people leaders are, and they're going to go forward no matter what. And it's being able to say no or to ask advice from other people, I think, is important.
It is. And I think the other thing about it is, and it's interesting, sort of slightly leading on from that, is when you do start your business, you will get a lot of setbacks. And you think your business is the greatest thing ever, and you can't understand why somebody doesn't see it as well, because to you it's blatantly obvious, that is what the world has needed, etc. And it's accepting that when people say no, not taking it quite so personally, they're not actually saying no, you're wrong. I think sometimes they're afraid to listen to what you're going to say, but also for whatever reason they don't want to, but it's not actually a personal thing against you. And I think that's quite hard, because particularly if it's your baby, your business, you can't understand why they don't get it.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that when somebody says no? How do you deal with that?
How do I deal with it? Again, I think we're all human. Sometimes it gets to me. I will not deny that it gets to me. I can have a day when I just think, oh, I don't know why I'm even bothering, just put the duvet over the head and waste of time or whatever. But mostly I've learnt, and I think I have learnt this, because I did find this very difficult at first. I found it because I did take it personally. I thought they were being personal to me by saying no. But now I realize it isn't that. They may have another appointment. Everybody has other things going on in their lives. And also it might not be the policy of that particular business at that time. So I think I'm a bit more resilient in that respect. So instead of having a real hissy fit and thinking I've just got it all wrong and stamping my feet and thinking, oh, I don't know why I'm bothering, sometimes I'll just take myself out for a walk for half an hour and just calm down, put it into perspective, on to the next. And it is difficult. I do not deny it is difficult, particularly because I think the care sector is not always as open as it should be to new systems, new ideas, new thoughts, I guess. But I'm not going to change that overnight. And it's working with people like yourselves and what we do that will eventually, hopefully, make a difference. And I think we just have to keep going, however hard it is at times.
That definitely speaks to your resilience. And yeah, it's quite a heartwarming story. And I particularly liked your comment about being in the care sector is like a drug. The more you can see yourself making a difference, the more you want to do it. And I think as a leader, that's a really good point, isn't it? Regardless of what sector you're in, if you can actually see yourself making a difference and you're enabled to do that, by whoever, whatever, you want to keep going, don't you?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And I think as I've got older, and I mean, without, because I don't really want to dwell on this, but it does sort of, I suppose, come into my mind much more. It's like when people say you need a 3-year plan, you need a 5-year plan, and then you need a 10-year plan. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I can probably do a 3. I might do a 5, but maybe let's hang on the 10-year at the moment. But it's, I don't see why. I mean, to be honest, if I am still going in 10 years' time, which I really seriously hope I am, to be doing this, why shouldn't I be doing this? Why should you be judged purely by your age? It's absolutely ridiculous. And I have so many friends who are both older than me, who are, I mean, another little story. I am power of attorney for a friend of mine, actually sort of a backhanded sort of relative, but fundamentally she's 87. If you met her, you wouldn't believe she is 87. She's gone through breast cancer in the last 2 years, come out the other side, had the breast cancer, decides to buy herself a static caravan because she likes Suffolk, so she can go down there for the weekend. She still drives. She's bought herself a new car. She edits a magazine. And sometimes I think she's got more energy than I do. And she said to me, I mean, she's cut back on a few bits, but ultimately, if you spoke to her, you wouldn't look at her or talk to her thinking she's 87. You really seriously wouldn't. She was a very, very high-powered PA for someone quite well known. She really knows her stuff about publishing. And to be honest, she could certainly tell the younger generation an awful lot about that world. And it's really interesting. And I just think, why are we age driven? So never mind the menopause. What about when we get to the other side? And actually, we've still got a heck of a lot to offer.
I think that's a really good point. Really good point. And obviously we're all women on this podcast, but actually there is something really important about that, about what it is. There isn't a number. And you hear people say, oh, well, 70 is the new 60 and 50 is the all the way down, all the way down. You see, I get myself all confused here, but all the way down.
Yeah.
But I don't see why we should be even putting that onto it, because there is no limit on what we should do and how we should do it. And there is a lot of focus around the menopause and the perimenopause and how women get through that and get to the other side. But there is another side. You're quite right. There is another side.
Absolutely.
And it is just as functioning as it was before.
It is. And it is really interesting that, suddenly I think possibly the other side might become the next sort of focus of attention in about 10 years' time. Who knows? But that's why leadership isn't, to me, leadership is you. It's not because you're leading a business. Leadership is the way you lead, the way you direct other people, and that they can learn from you. Not everything, obviously, but they can be guided, whatever. And I think that's really what leadership is. For me, anyway. And I think I've been very lucky, as I said, with regards to that.
And that's so important, isn't it? Because there's such a lot of focus on leadership roles, the word role and titles. And I know we've spoken in the past to other people on the podcast about leadership is more than role, more than a title. It is about you, what you do, and like you say, how you impact on other people, how you choose to lead. It is absolutely about the person. I think we advocate for that, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And it is. It's such it's, again, sometimes it's a little bit of a misused word, because I mean, what's the phrase? You lead by example. And sometimes leading by example is not what one would wish to see, frankly.
Not in today's world, no.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But the opposite, really. But I think it's all about being true to yourself, isn't it? It's being true to your values and leading by your values, with your values, and hopefully encouraging people within those values. And that's what I feel that I've tried to do within my business. And it's also accepting sometimes that you can't answer every question. People have come to me with queries, and I have one client. I would dearly, dearly love to wave a magic wand over their situation. I really would. And they have gone through struggles that, when I sit there feeling a bit down in the mouth and thinking my life might, they haven't listened to what I'm talking about or whatever it is, I just think about them and I think, I don't really know what I'm making a big fuss about, frankly. But I think when you look at it and you look at what you do, you can't answer every question. You can't be all things to all people. And that's when I think it's important to turn around to other people and say, okay, look, I can't help this. Do I know somebody who can step in? And that's where leadership and around the people you've got to know and your black book and your network become vital to you. Because if I can't answer that question, the chances are, because of the way perhaps we've lived, where communication was much more like we're doing now, which is, I know we're on a podcast, but fundamentally we're still talking to one another. We have grown up with a society that talks. So I will have met somebody that might be able to help them. And that, I think, is the other thing that is so important about what we do. It's being able to refer and help by referring to somebody else that could support. And that's vital.
That's a really interesting point about growing up with a society that talks, when we spend a lot of time discussing how younger people don't communicate with each other. They don't have skills. They don't know where they're going. They're buried in their phones. But actually, as somebody who's setting up a business now at this time of year, or has set up a successful business at this time of life, what would you say to the younger people coming along? What would be your pieces of advice to them to say, this is how I have navigated mistakes, this is what I have learned, and perhaps this is what would help you?
Be curious and don't be afraid.
Mm.
I think those would be my two main things, because I think I have always been inquisitive, I guess. Um, I mean, I'm terrible, really, because to the point where I used to read a book and I'd read the end first because I wanted to
Oh, I
know
do that.
what.
Annoys a lot of
Okay,
people.
which on a Kindle isn't quite so easy to do, but in a book it's so much easier.
Depends how big your text is. How many pages have I got to get through?
Yeah, I agree. But I think you've got to have a curiosity about life, about people, about whatever it is you want to do. And we've all been to things, and I know when I met both of you, you were both talking, and I guess you often see, you go to a talk and you listen to people, and the number of times, and I've done it, where you're almost afraid to stick your hand up because your question might seem a bit stupid, or people are going to look at you, because everybody goes, looks at you straight away, and you think, oh, okay, is my question right? But I think you've got to be unafraid to ask those questions. So those probably would be my two things. Just be curious and don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's how you find things out. And I think however much we can do it by going on to whatever whatever, whether it's Google or Yahoo or whoever you use, and you can ask the question and they will give you the answer. It's never the same as actually talking to somebody, because what you might get the answer, but the person that you talk to will give you a reason around that answer.
Mm.
And this goes back to what I wanted to do with the advisory side of my business. I didn't just want to say, well, okay, you could have domiciliary care, or you could have living care, or you could go into a care home, and that's it. That's not what I would do. The first thing I would then be doing is talking around each of them, what their pros, what their cons are, where they could go, what their choices are around that, and what would be suitable, and obviously how much cost, etc., whatever. And that's what I mean, that you have got to be able to talk to people to give that. And that's not going to happen I've lost the will if I had to text all of that. First sentence, oh God, just pick the phone up. It's so much easier.
Even though,
And interestingly, sorry, I was just going to say, interestingly, I am finding more people pick the phone up now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Nikki.
no, I was going to ask you about that. Even though the young people are afraid of the phone, it never ceases to amaze me as a person who didn't have mobile phones when I grew up, but they're afraid of the phone, afraid to talk. And
Yes,
that's so important. That's a huge piece of communication.
it is, because it goes back to everything that we're talking about. If you can't communicate, where do you go?
Mm.
How are we going to know about anything if we don't communicate? And you're not going to pick it all up from your phone. And I say to my grandchildren frequently, when I first went to Italy, when I think I was 19, you used to have to go to the post office and request a phone call to the UK, and had to sit there until you were allocated your phone booth to speak to the UK. And they just thought that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well,
The
where's your
world is
mobile?
small.
Didn't have one.
Janet, you said something earlier, and I think it's really important, and particularly if you're looking at setting up a business, but I think just in any career is around your network and your little contact book, who you can contact. And I think, Nikki, you were talking about that when we
Yes.
first met this morning. How important is that, to have those sorts of contacts and that network?
Well, I think it's probably been the thing that served me the most, if I'm being completely honest. When gosh, is it 10 years ago? We set up a living care company 10 years ago, and just pre-Brexit, actually. I don't know whether the person who set it up regretted that sort of straight afterwards, but anyway, it was fine. We did. Basically, we set it up, and we had a certain amount of money when we set it up. And for the first 9 months, I think it was, we didn't have a website. It was all done by going out there and talking to people, getting to know people, all done by networking. And actually, to be honest, it's the bit I've enjoyed the most, because to me, meeting people it's my lifeblood, actually. Not just from a business perspective. I've got to know people who've become friends, but we very much set the business up around networking. And it's something I was talking to with somebody else about the other day, and she said exactly the same thing. And again, I think it comes from our generation. We're used to talking to people. So I love going networking. I hate going to a party. I will say, if I have to go to a party, I'll probably try and avoid it. But networking, I absolutely love, because everybody's there for the same reason.
Yeah.
And I never network thinking, oh, I'm going to come away with some business. I always go because I think I'm interested in what they do. I never go thinking that somebody's going to want me to talk about care. They might not know anything about it. Might not even care at that point, but you never know who they know. And I think that goes back to, it's all who you know, or how you work people, and how you work with people, should I say. And that's why I still network a lot, an awful lot. I mean, we met because of
We
going
did.
to a
Yes.
networking event.
We did.
And I think, there are times you think, oh God, why am I going to this at 7:30 in the morning? And I mean, I went to one the other week. I met 4 potential clients, which I had never expected to do, because I don't expect it. But it's also the way, and that goes back to the other side, is that somebody else's business could be really beneficial for someone I know. I don't know that. And this is what it should all be about. Everybody's supporting one another in a different way. But I do honestly think that, and I sort of slightly drifted from this, but when we were talking about it, I mean, I can remember as a child, my mother would stop and talk to anybody. And somebody else said this the other day. She said, yeah, it used to be so embarrassing. I said, for goodness sake, just carry on walking. Why are you talking to them? And I realized I do the same. And in fact, I've seen it with the grandchildren. Yank, it's about time we went. But equally, it's because you're interested in people. We work in a sector, in the care sector, definitely. If you're not interested in people, you shouldn't really be working in it, because that's what it's all about. It's about people. And I think that's the most important thing in my life, without a shadow of a doubt.
That's brilliant. No, I think that, and that's a really nice sort of comment to, think about winding up on, I guess, really. The one other thing I've just got for you, Janet, while I remember,
Yes.
because Nikki will remind me otherwise, is what question would you like to ask our next guest?
I would like to ask them, because obviously I'm going to focus a little bit on, because obviously starting my business sort of slightly later in life, I would like to ask them if they know if there is a right time in their life that they feel they should or could or would start a business, and why.
Lovely.
Excellent
That's
question.
really good. Yeah, really good. Thank you. I'm just thinking who our next
Well,
guest is, and I
I
think
was put
that'd
on
be
the spot,
perfect.
so you can put the next person on the spot.
We will. I think they'll quite like that. I'm not going to say who it is, but yeah.
No,
All
I
right.
think they'll quite
No,
like
it's
that.
really fab.
We're
I
podcasting
do.
through today, so I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
our next guest will be really, really good at answering that one.
Okay. Well, I need to know who it is when.
We'll let you know.
Oh dear.
Super. But thank you. Nikki, is there anything else that popped up in Janet's conversation that you might like to just explore, or?
Oh, so much. There's so much that I would like to explore. We could talk for ages, Janet. I think the really important one of the really important things there for me was around being able to talk to people and being able to communicate with people, and to do that honestly and with authenticity is really important. And there is a young man who has asked me to mention him through the podcast. I'm going to mention this guy because he talks to everybody. So Jason, this is for you, as I promised. He's a smiler, he's a talker, and everybody knows him. And as a forward-facing person in the health business, I think it's really important you can see that younger people today actually do have communication skills and are able to speak to people and are able to smile. So preconceived ideas often are a blocker. And so really what we need to do is make sure that we are always there to have that conversation, because every day's a school day. You never know what you're going to learn, and you never know how that small
Exactly.
communication can influence somebody else's life as well as your own. So I think that was a really good
I
point.
agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Totally. Yeah. Brilliant.
Super.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
having me on your podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you're
It
absolutely right. We
has.
probably could be talking this time tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not a bad
And I think
thing.
just to say, Janet, yeah, thank you. And just for me, just as a reflection, it really shows how your values and your integrity, it's kind of oozes through to your business and what you're trying to do and trying to achieve, and the reasons behind what you're trying to achieve and what you're doing. And
I
I think
hope
that's
so.
so important, is living what you do through your values, and that really shows. So thank you very much for sharing your
Well, no,
journey with
thank
us.
you. Thank you for asking me. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And I shall look forward to listening, well, hopefully listening to myself thinking, oh, God, who
Yes.
is that woman on there?
Super. Well, thank you very much.
Anyway,
And just
thank you very
thank
much.
you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we look forward to you joining us again in the future. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.